Have you ever wondered what fate might have in store when you make a simple mistake? Olivia Chen never expected that missing her bus stop would change her life forever. As rain pelted down on that fateful night, a sleek black car pulled up beside her trembling figure. The window rolled down, revealing a face she couldn't quite place in the darkness. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice somehow familiar yet distant. Little did she know that the stranger extending his hand was none other than Alexander Reed, the billionaire CEO whose face graced business magazines across the country. And little did she suspect that behind his composed exterior beat the heart of a man who had never forgotten his first love from 15 years ago. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Rain pattered against the windows of Morgan Stanley law firm as Olivia Chen stared at the clock. 9:47 p.m. Another late night filing paperwork as a paralegal while her dreams of becoming an attorney slowly collected dust alongside the law books she could barely afford. Her shoulders ached from hunching over her desk all day, and her eyes burned from staring at contracts until the words blurred together. "You heading out soon, Liv?" asked Marissa from the cubicle beside hers, already sliding her designer purse over her shoulder. Olivia nodded, gathering her worn notebooks and sliding them into her equally worn messenger bag. "Just need to finish filing these last few documents." "Girl, you work too hard for what they pay you," Marissa said, flipping her perfect hair over her shoulder. "You should come out with us tonight. A bunch of us are hitting that new rooftop bar on 5th. Olivia forced a smile. "Maybe next time. I've got an early morning tomorrow." The truth was, she couldn't afford a night out at a fancy rooftop bar, not with rent due in a week and her student loans eating up most of her paycheck. Besides, social gatherings had never been her forte. She'd always been the quiet one, the wallflower who preferred the company of books to people. After Marissa left, Olivia finished her work in the peaceful quiet of the empty office. By the time she stepped out of the building, the light drizzle from earlier had transformed into a steady downpour. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself, cursing silently for forgetting her umbrella that morning. The bus stop was 3 blocks away, and by the time she reached it, her dark hair was plastered to her face and her clothes were soaked through. She huddled beneath the small shelter, checking her watch. The last bus would arrive in 10 minutes. She just needed to hold out a little longer. When the bus finally arrived, Olivia climbed aboard with relief, dropping her fare into the box before finding a seat near the back. The warmth of the bus made her eyelids heavy, and before she knew it, she was drifting off, lulled by the gentle rocking motion and the patter of rain against the windows. She jerked awake with a start, momentarily disoriented. Looking out the window, she realized with growing horror that nothing looked familiar. This wasn't her neighborhood with its familiar coffee shop on the corner and the small bookstore she frequented. Instead, dilapidated buildings lined the street, their windows either boarded up or broken. Graffiti covered nearly every surface, and the few people out at this hour looked far from friendly. Panic rushed through her as she stood up abruptly. "Excuse me," she called to the driver. "I think I missed my stop." The driver, an older man with a weathered face, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "End of the line's coming up. You'll have to get off and catch a bus going the other direction." "But when is the next bus?" Olivia asked, her voice rising with anxiety. The driver shrugged. "Last one for the night. Service starts again at 5 a.m. Olivia's stomach dropped. She fumbled for her phone, only to find the battery had died. Perfect. Just perfect. When the bus came to a stop, she had no choice but to step off into the unfamiliar neighborhood. The rain had picked up again, and there wasn't even a proper shelter at this stop, just a metal pole with a faded schedule. She stood beneath the meager protection of the storefront awning, trying to assess her options. She could try to walk back toward a main street and hope to find a taxi, but in this gruk weather and this neighborhood, that seemed risky. She could try to find an open business with a phone, but everything around her was shuttered for the night. As she debated, a wave of exhaustion hit her. She hadn't eaten since her small lunch hours ago, and the stress of the situation, combined with her fatigue, made her legs feel wobbly. Olivia leaned more heavily against the storefront, trying to steady herself. Black spots danced before her eyes as a wave of dizziness washed over her. The last thing she remembered was the ground rushing up to meet her before everything went dark. The sensation of warmth was the first thing that registered when consciousness began to return. Then the gentle motion, as if she were floating. Gradually, Olivia became aware that she was in a moving vehicle, her body sinking into buttery soft leather. A car, an expensive one, by the feel of it. Her eyes fluttered open to see a dashboard illuminated with soft blue light. Rain still pattered against the windows, but inside it was warm and dry. Panic surged through her as she realized she had no idea whose car she was in or how she'd gotten there. She must have made a sound because a deep voice spoke from beside her. "You're awake. Good." Olivia turned her head to see a man behind the wheel. In the dim light of the car, she could make out a strong profile, dark hair, and what appeared to be an expensive suit. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Who are you?" she managed to ask, her voice coming out as a croak. "Where am I?" "You passed down on the sidewalk," the man explained, his voice calm and measured. "I couldn't just leave you there. It's not a safe neighborhood, especially at this hour." Olivia tried to push herself more upright, her heart hammering in her chest. She was in a stranger's car. This was exactly the kind of situation her mother had always warned her about. As if sensing her panic, the man added, "I'm just giving you a ride home. You can check your GPS if you want to make sure we're heading in the right direction. You told me your address before you dozed off again." Had she? Olivia couldn't remember. The fog in her brain was still heavy. "My phone's dead," she said, patting her pockets to confirm it was still there. "There's a charger in the compartment in front of you," he offered. She hesitated, then opened the compartment to find a high-end phone charger. She plugged in her phone with trembling fingers, waiting for it to gather enough charge to turn on. When it did, she checked their location. They were indeed heading toward her apartment building in a working-class neighborhood on the other side of the city. Some of her tension eased, but she remained wary. "Thank you for helping me, but I don't even know your name." There was a brief pause before he answered. "Alex." "And you're welcome, Olivia." Olivia frowned. Had she told him her name too? She must have, though she had no recollection of it. The rain continued to drum against the roof of the car as they drove in silence for several minutes. "You should eat something," Alex said eventually, breaking the silence. "There's a protein bar in the glove compartment. It'll help with the dizziness." Olivia hesitated, then reached for the glove compartment. Sure enough, there was a high-quality protein bar inside. Her stomach growled audibly, making the decision for her. She unwrapped it and took a small bite. "Thank you," she said softly. "I didn't realize how hungry I was." "Long day at work?" he asked, his tone conversational, as if picking up a stranded woman was an everyday occurrence for him. "You could say that," she replied, taking another bite of the protein bar. "I'm a paralegal at Morgan Stanley." As soon as the words left her mouth, Olivia wondered why she was sharing personal information with a stranger. But there was something about him that felt oddly familiar, like a sense of déjà vu she couldn't quite place. "That's a prestigious firm," he commented, "though they work their employees too hard, from what I've heard." Olivia gave a small laugh. "You're not wrong about that." They lapsed into silence again, though it felt less tense now. Olivia watched the city lights pass by, wondering about the man beside her. He was clearly wealthy. The car alone must have cost more than she made in several years. What had he been doing in that neighborhood at this hour? Before she could find a polite way to ask, the car slowed as they approached her apartment building. It was a modest 5-story walk-up, nothing like the luxury high-rises downtown. She felt a twinge of embarrassment as Alex pulled up to the curb. "This is me," she said unnecessarily, gathering her bag. Alex nodded but made no move to get out. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to call." Olivia took the card automatically, tucking it into her bag without looking at it. "Thank you again for your help. I don't know what would have happened if—" "No need to thank me," he said, his voice gentle. "Just take better care of yourself, Olivia." There was something in the way he said her name that stirred a distant memory, but her tired brain couldn't make the connection. She nodded, then opened the door and stepped out into the night. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air fresh and cool. Alex waited until she was safely inside the building before driving away, his taillights disappearing around the corner. It wasn't until Olivia was climbing the stairs to her third-floor apartment that she realized she hadn't asked for his full name. By the time she'd showered and collapsed into bed, exhaustion had overtaken her curiosity about her mysterious rescuer. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that she'd probably never see him again. Morning arrived with sunshine streaming through the blinds Olivia had forgotten to close. She groaned, rolling over to check her phone. 7:15 a.m. She had just enough time for a quick breakfast before heading to work. As she shuffled to the kitchen to make coffee, the events of the previous night came flooding back. Had she really passed out on the street and been rescued by a stranger in an expensive car? It seemed more like a dream than reality. As she waited for her coffee to brew, she rummaged through her bag for the business card the man had given her. When she found it, her coffee mug nearly slipped from her fingers. Alexander Reed, CEO, Red Innovations. The name meant nothing to her at first, but as she stared at the embossed lettering, recognition dawned. Reed Innovations was one of the largest tech companies in the country. She'd seen the name in the news, on billboards, everywhere. Curiosity piqued. She grabbed her laptop and searched for Alexander Reed CEO. Thousands of results appeared instantly, along with images of a striking man in tailored suits at various business events. Olivia's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the strong jawline and dark, intense eyes. It was him, the man who had driven her home last night. "No way," she whispered to herself, scrolling through article after article about the business magnate. Alexander Reed, 35, had built Reed Innovations from the ground up, transforming it from a small startup into a tech giant worth billions in just a decade. He was known for being brilliant but intensely private, rarely giving interviews, and avoiding the social media spotlight that many CEOs embraced. What would someone like him be doing in that neighborhood last night, and why would he personally help someone like her? A notification on her phone interrupted her thoughts. She was going to be late if she didn't leave in the next 5 minutes. Reluctantly, she closed the laptop, her mind still swimming with questions about Alexander Reed. Throughout her workday, Olivia found herself distracted by thoughts of her unexpected encounter. During her lunch break, she researched more about him, learning that despite his wealth and status, he was known for his philanthropy and ethical business practices. Unlike many of his peers who flaunted their wealth, Alexander seemed to shy away from the typical billionaire lifestyle, preferring to focus on innovation and charitable work. "Earth to Olivia," Marissa's voice broke through her thoughts. "I've been talking to you for like 5 minutes. Are you even listening?" "Sorry," Olivia said, closing the browser window on her phone. "Just distracted." Clearly, Marissa raised an eyebrow. "Anyway, as I was saying, there's this huge charity gala next weekend that Morgan Stanley bought tables for. The partners want some of the staff to attend since several major clients will be there." Olivia nodded absently, her mind still on Alexander Reed. "Hello? This is a big deal," Marissa continued. "It's at the Meridian Hotel, super exclusive. We'd be rubbing elbows with some of the wealthiest people in the city." "That sounds nice," Olivia replied politely, though the thought of making small talk with wealthy strangers made her stomach clench. "Nice? It's the opportunity of a lifetime. And, get this." Marissa leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I heard Alexander Reed might be there. You know, the tech billionaire? He never attends these things, but apparently, his company is one of the major donors this year." At the mention of his name, Olivia nearly choked on her water. "Alexander Reed? Yeah, you know, only one of the richest men in America," Marissa said with an eye roll. "God, Liv, you really need to get your head out of those law books sometimes." "Right," Olivia murmured, her mind racing. Could this be a chance to thank him properly? To find out why he had helped her? "Anyway," Marissa continued, oblivious to Olivia's inner turmoil, "Mr. Patterson said he wants you to be one of the staff representatives." "Me?" Olivia blinked in surprise. "Why me?" "Because you're the only paralegal who can talk intelligently about the Henderson case. And apparently one of the clients will be there, Marissa explained with a hint of envy in her voice. So, what are you going to wear? Panic replaced surprise as Olivia realized the implications. I don't have anything suitable for an event like that. Marissa gave her a critical once-over. No offense, but you're right. Your usual look is more dedicated worker bee than sophisticated legal professional. She brightened. We should go shopping this weekend. I know all the best places for designer consignment. Before Olivia could protest, Marissa had already made plans for a Saturday shopping expedition, leaving Olivia to wonder what she'd gotten herself into. As if meeting Alexander Reed again wouldn't be nerve-wracking enough, now she had to worry about looking the part too. The week passed in a blur of work and anxiety about the upcoming gala. Despite her initial reluctance, Olivia found herself swept along by Marissa's enthusiasm during their shopping trip. They found a midnight blue gown at a consignment store that was only slightly beyond her budget. It was simple but elegant, with a modest neckline and a flowing skirt that made her feel almost graceful. You clean up pretty good, Chen, Marissa had said approvingly, as Olivia twirled in front of the mirror. Now we just need to do something about that hair of yours, and maybe teach you how to use more than just lip balm. By the night of the gala, Olivia's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. Marissa had come over early to help with her hair and makeup, transforming her usually plain appearance into something almost sophisticated. Her long black hair was styled in loose waves, and subtle makeup enhanced her almond-shaped eyes and high cheekbones. Remember, confidence is key, Marissa instructed as they approached the grand entrance of the Meridian Hotel in a taxi. Stand tall, smile, and pretend you belong. Easy for her to say, Olivia thought. Marissa had been born for events like this, with her natural charisma and social ease. For Olivia, it felt like walking into a foreign country without knowing the language. The Meridian's ballroom was a vision of luxury, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed crowd. Live music played softly in the background as waiters glided between guests offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Olivia accepted a glass of champagne more for something to do with her hands than any desire to drink it. There's Mr. Patterson with the Henderson clients, Marissa whispered, nodding toward a group near one of the ornate pillars. We should go say hello. Olivia followed dutifully, plastering a smile on her face as she was introduced to important people whose names she immediately forgot in her nervousness. She answered questions about the Henderson case on autopilot, her eyes constantly scanning the room for a glimpse of Alexander Reed. An hour into the event, she had begun to think he wasn't coming after all. Perhaps Marissa's information had been wrong. Perhaps it was for the best. What would she even say to him if he were here? She excused herself from a conversation that had long since lost her interest and made her way to a relatively quiet corner of the ballroom. Her feet were already protesting the unaccustomed heels, and she longed for a moment of peace away from the constant need to make small talk. Not enjoying the party? The deep voice behind her sent a jolt of recognition through her body. She turned slowly, coming face to face with Alexander Reed himself. Up close, and in proper lighting, he was even more striking than she remembered. Tall and broad-shouldered, he carried himself with an effortless confidence that made the other men in the room seem like boys playing dress-up. His charcoal gray suit was impeccably tailored, emphasizing his athletic build. But it was his eyes that captured her attention. Dark and intense, they seemed to look through her rather than at her. "Mr. Reed," she managed to say, her voice embarrassingly breathless. I wasn't sure if you'd be here tonight." A hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I could say the same about you, Olivia. This doesn't seem like your typical scene." The fact that he remembered her name shouldn't have surprised her. He had driven her home, after all. But somehow it did. "It's not," she admitted. "I'm here representing my firm. We work with some of the donors." He nodded as if this confirmed something for him. "Morgan Stanley, right? You mentioned you were a paralegal there." She was touched that he remembered that detail from their brief conversation. "Yes, that's right. I've been there for about 2 years now." "And do you enjoy it?" he asked, his gaze intently focused on her in a way that made her feel like they were the only two people in the crowded ballroom. It's challenging, she said diplomatically. But I'm learning a lot. Alexander raised an eyebrow, clearly seeing through her polite answer. That's not quite the same as enjoying it. Olivia gave a small laugh, surprising herself. No, I suppose it's not. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, and Alexander smoothly exchanged her empty glass for a full one. What would you rather be doing, if not working at Morgan Stanley? The directness of his question caught her off guard. Most people at events like this stuck to safe topics: the weather, the venue, mutual acquaintances. They didn't ask probing questions about career aspirations and personal satisfaction. I'd like to be a lawyer, eventually, she found herself admitting. I've been taking night classes, trying to finish my law degree, but it's taking longer than I hoped. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. The law is a demanding field, especially when you're working full-time while studying. What area of law interests you? Public interest law, she replied, warming to the topic despite herself. I want to help people who can't afford proper legal representation. Growing up, I saw how the system fails those without resources, and I'd like to change that, even if it's just one case at a time. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, recognition perhaps, or approval. A noble goal, though not particularly lucrative. Not everything worth doing pays well, Olivia said, then immediately blushed at how preachy she sounded. No. You're absolutely right, Alexander said, his expression softening. In fact, it's refreshing to hear someone at an event like this talk about something other than profit margins and market share. Before Olivia could respond, they were interrupted by a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. Alex, there you are. The Westbrook team has been looking for you. Alexander's expression cooled noticeably. James, I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. Wouldn't miss it, the man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze shifted to Olivia, assessing her with a dismissiveness that made her want to disappear. And who might this be? This is Olivia Chen, Alexander said, his voice taking on a protective edge that surprised her. She's with Morgan Stanley. James's interest visibly increased at the mention of the prestigious law firm. One of Patterson's associates? Paralegal, Olivia corrected quietly. I see, James said, his interest fading as quickly as it had appeared. He turned back to Alexander. Well, don't let me interrupt, but do find time for the Westbrooks before they leave. They're considering increasing their investment. With a nod to Alexander and a dismissive glance at Olivia, he moved on to another group. I apologize for James, Alexander said once the man was out of earshot. He has a talent for making people feel insignificant. It's fine, Olivia said, used to being overlooked by powerful men in expensive suits. I'm sure you need to go speak with the Westbrooks, whoever they are. Alexander didn't move. Actually, I'd much rather continue our conversation, unless you need to get back to your colleagues. Warmth spread through Olivia's chest at his words. No, I'm fine right here. He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face and made him look younger, more approachable. Good. Now, tell me more about these night classes of yours. They talked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 4 to 5 minutes. Alexander proved to be an attentive listener and asked thoughtful questions about her studies, her background, and her aspirations. Olivia found herself opening up in a way she rarely did with anyone, let alone someone she had just met. There was something about him that felt familiar, comfortable even, despite his wealth and status. Eventually, though, reality intruded in the form of Marissa, who appeared at Olivia's elbow with wide eyes. Liv, Mr. Patterson is looking for you. The Hendersons have questions about the case. Olivia reluctantly turned back to Alexander. I'm sorry, I need to. Of course, he said, understanding in his eyes. Duty calls. She hesitated, not wanting their conversation to end but unsure how to keep it going beyond tonight. Alexander seemed to read her thoughts. I enjoyed talking with you, Olivia, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He produced a sleek fountain pen and took her hand gently, writing something on her palm. My personal number, in case you ever need a ride home again. The touch of his fingers against her palm sent a shiver up her arm. Thank you. she managed to say, curling her fingers protectively over the number as if it might disappear. Until next time, he said with a slight bow of his head before disappearing into the crowd. Marissa, who had been watching the exchange with her mouth agape, grabbed Olivia's arm as soon as Alexander was out of earshot. What? Was that? Did Alexander Reed just give you his personal number? On your hand? Like we're in high school? Olivia couldn't help the small smile that curved her lips. Apparently so. How do you even know him? Why didn't you tell me you knew him? Oh my God, everyone saw you two talking. Do you have any idea how many women in this room would kill to be in your position right now? It's a long story, Olivia said, the events of the past week still feeling somewhat surreal. Come on, didn't you say Mr. Patterson was looking for me? As they made their way across the ballroom, Olivia found herself scanning the crowd for another glimpse of Alexander, but he seemed to have vanished. The only evidence of their encounter was the number written on her palm and the lingering warmth of his touch. The following morning, Olivia sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the number she had carefully transferred from her palm to a notepad the night before. Should she call him? Text him? What would she even say? Thanks for the conversation last night seemed inadequate, but I haven't stopped thinking about you since the moment we met seemed far too forward. In the harsh light of day, their connection at the gala felt like a dream, a momentary lapse in the natural order of things, where billionaire CEOs and struggling paralegals occupied separate worlds. With a sigh, she set down her coffee mug and picked up her textbook. Sunday mornings were for studying, not daydreaming about impossibly handsome men who were so far out of her league they might as well be from different planets. She had just settled into her reading when her phone chimed with a text notification. Probably Marissa, wanting to dissect every detail of last night's encounter for the 100th time. But when she glanced at the screen, her heart skipped a beat. Unknown number. Good morning, Olivia. I hope I'm not disturbing your weekend. This is Alexander Reed. Olivia stared at the message, reading it over and over. He had texted her first. She hadn't even given him her number. How had he? Before she could ponder this mystery, another message appeared. Alexander, I got your number from your firm's contact information. I hope you don't mind. Of course, she thought. As a major client of Morgan Stanley, he would have access to that information. She should probably be concerned about the ethics of him using business contacts for personal reasons. But she couldn't bring herself to care. With trembling fingers, she typed a reply. Olivia, good morning. You're not disturbing anything. Just studying. His response came immediately, as if he had been waiting by his phone. Alexander, law school waits for no one, not even Sunday mornings. I admire your dedication. Olivia smiled, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. Olivia, it's not always easy to focus, especially after eventful weekends. Alexander, speaking of which, I realized I never properly apologized for the other night when we first met. Finding yourself in a stranger's car must have been terrifying, regardless of my intentions. His consideration touched her. Most men in his position wouldn't give a second thought to how their actions might have been perceived. Olivia, I was scared at first, but you were a perfect gentleman. I'm the one who should be apologizing for the inconvenience. Alexander, there was no inconvenience. In fact, he paused, and for a moment Olivia thought he might not continue. Then, Alexander, I'd like to see you again, Olivia. Properly this time. Would you have dinner with me next Friday? Olivia nearly dropped her phone. Alexander Reed, billionaire CEO, wanted to have dinner with her? Part of her wanted to pinch herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming, while another part screamed caution. Men like him didn't date women like her without an agenda. But the memory of their conversation at the gala, the genuine interest in his eyes when she spoke about her dreams and aspirations, made her hesitate to dismiss the invitation outright. Olivia, I'd like that. Simple. Direct. Before she could overthink it, she pressed send. His reply came moments later. Alexander, excellent. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable. And Olivia? I'm looking forward to it. The rest of the week passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Olivia told no one about the upcoming date, not even Marissa. It felt too fragile, too improbable to share. as if speaking about it might break the spell. By Friday evening, she had changed outfits at least a dozen times before settling on a simple navy blue dress that flattered her figure without being too formal or revealing. Comfortable, he had said, which left a wide range of possibilities. She opted for low heels, subtle makeup, and left her hair down in its natural waves. At exactly 7 p.m., her buzzer rang. When she answered, the doorman's voice informed her that Mr. Reed was waiting for her in the lobby. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her purse and headed downstairs. Alexander was standing near the entrance, his back to her, as he gazed out at the street. Even from behind, there was no mistaking his imposing figure. He had dressed down for the occasion, wearing dark jeans and a charcoal gray sweater that looked casually expensive. As if sensing her presence, he turned just as she reached the bottom of the stairs. His eyes widened slightly as he took her in, a reaction that sent a pleasant warmth through her body. "Olivia," he said, his voice warm. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she said, suddenly shy under his appreciative gaze. "You look different. Good different," she added hastily. He smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "I thought I'd leave the CEO uniform at home tonight." Outside, she expected to see the same luxury car from their first encounter, but instead, a more modest sedan was parked at the curb. Alexander must have noticed her surprise. "I thought we'd attract less attention this way," he explained as he opened the passenger door for her. "Is that all right?" The consideration touched her. He was trying to make her comfortable, to minimize the vast differences in their circumstances. "It's perfect," she assured him. Instead of heading downtown toward the high-end restaurants she had expected, Alexander drove them to a quieter neighborhood, eventually parking near a small, unassuming building with a weathered sign reading, "Bella Not, best Italian food in the city," he said as he came around to open her door. "And more importantly, a place where we can talk without being interrupted every 5 minutes by business associates or social climbers." The restaurant was cozy and dimly lit, with check tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. The owner, an elderly Italian man with a thick accent, greeted Alexander with obvious familiarity, leading them to a secluded booth in the back. "You come here often?" Olivia asked after they were seated with menus and a bottle of red wine. "When I can," Alexander replied. "My father used to bring me here when I was a boy. It hasn't changed much since then." It was the first personal detail he had shared about his family, and Olivia found herself wanting to know more. "Your father has good taste." A shadow passed over Alexander's face. "Had. He passed away 10 years ago." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, feeling clumsy for having brought up a painful subject so early in the evening. Alexander shook his head. "No need to apologize. You couldn't have known." He took a sip of his wine. "What about your family? Are your parents still in the picture?" Olivia nodded, relaxing slightly as the conversation moved to safer ground. "My mother lives in California with my stepfather. My father is back in China. I see my mother a couple of times a year, but it's been a while since I visited my father." "It must have been challenging, having parents on different continents," Alexander observed. "It was," Olivia admitted. "But it taught me to be independent from a young age." Their conversation flowed easily after that, moving from family to favorite books to travel experiences. Alexander was well-read and had traveled extensively for both business and pleasure, but he listened to her more modest experiences with genuine interest, never making her feel inadequate for her lack of worldliness. Over pasta and wine, Olivia found herself opening up about her childhood in a small California town, her early love of books and learning, and her decision to move to the city for college against her mother's wishes. "She wanted me to stay close to home, maybe marry a nice local boy and settle down," Olivia explained with a small laugh. "She never understood my desire to see more of the world, to make a difference." Alexander's expression had turned thoughtful. "And what about now? Has she come around to your choices?" Olivia shrugged. "She worries, thinks I work too hard for too little reward. She doesn't understand why I couldn't be content with just being a paralegal instead of pushing myself through law school at night." "Parents often want to protect their children from struggle," Alexander said. "But sometimes, It's through struggle that we find out who we really are. The words resonated with Olivia, making her wonder about his own struggles. Despite his current success, building a company from nothing couldn't have been easy. "What about you?" she asked. "Was your path always clear to you?" Alexander took a moment before answering, swirling the wine in his glass. "Not always. There was a time when I considered a different direction entirely." "Really?" Olivia leaned forward, intrigued. What would Alexander Reed have become if not a tech mogul? A smile played at his lips. "A writer, perhaps. I always loved books, lost myself in stories. My father thought it was a waste of time. Stories don't build empires, he used to say. But they can change the world in other ways," Olivia said softly. Alexander's eyes met hers, something like recognition flickering in their depths. "Exactly. That's precisely what I used to argue." The intensity of his gaze made her heart flutter. There was something almost familiar about this moment, about him, though she couldn't place why. "Did we—" she started, then hesitated. "I'm sorry if this sounds strange, but have we met before? Before that night on the bus, I mean." Alexander's expression shifted, becoming unreadable. "What makes you ask that?" Olivia shook her head, feeling foolish. "Nothing specific, just a feeling, I suppose. Like déjà vu." He seemed to choose his words carefully. Life has a way of bringing people together at unexpected times. Perhaps we're just kindred spirits. Before she could press further, their dessert arrived at tiramisu to share, momentarily diverting her attention. When the conversation resumed, Alexander steered it toward her studies and future plans, and the strange moment of recognition faded. By the time they left the restaurant, the night had grown cool. Alexander draped his jacket over her shoulders without being asked, the warmth of it enveloping her along with his subtle cologne. "Thank you for dinner," Olivia said as they walked slowly back to the car. "It was lovely." "The pleasure was mine," Alexander replied, his hand briefly touching the small of her back as he guided her around a puddle. The simple contact sent a shiver up her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. The drive back to her apartment was filled with comfortable silence, broken occasionally by observations about buildings they passed, or music playing softly on the radio. Olivia found herself wishing the journey would last longer, reluctant for the evening to end. When they arrived at her building, Alexander insisted on walking her to the door, a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and entirely right. "I'd like to see you again," he said as they stood before the entrance, his voice low and sincere. "If you're willing." Olivia looked up at him, taking in the strong lines of his face, the intensity in his dark eyes. Everything about him should have intimidated her. His wealth, his power, his sheer physical presence. Yet instead, she felt drawn to him, as if some invisible thread connected them. "I'd like that too," she said simply. Alexander smiled, then leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to step away if she wished. When she didn't move, he brushed his lips against her cheek, the brief contact sending warmth spreading through her body. "Good night, Olivia," he murmured near her ear. "Good night, Alexander," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She watched him walk back to his car, only turning to enter her building when he gave a final wave before driving away. Inside her apartment, she leaned against the closed door, her fingertips touching the spot on her cheek where his lips had been, wondering how a single evening could turn her carefully ordered world upside down. The next morning, Olivia woke to a text message from Alexander. "Good morning. I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" The directness of his message made her smile. No games, no waiting the socially acceptable 3 days before making contact. His straightforwardness was refreshing. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a pattern. Dinner at small, out-of-the-way restaurants where they could talk without interruption. Walks through quiet neighborhoods. Once, a private showing at a small art gallery after hours, arranged by Alexander for an exhibition he thought she would enjoy. Through it all, Olivia waited for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when Alexander would reveal himself to be like every other powerful man she had encountered, entitled, condescending, ultimately seeing her as a temporary amusement rather than an equal. But that moment never came. Instead, Alexander listened when she spoke, sought her opinions, respected her boundaries. He never pushed for more intimacy than she was ready to give, though the chemistry between them grew with each meeting. Still, she kept their relationship private, telling no one, not even Marissa. It felt too fragile, too precious to expose to outside scrutiny. And perhaps, deep down, she feared that naming it would break whatever spell had brought them together. On a chilly Friday evening, nearly a month after their first date, Alexander picked her up for what he described as a special evening. He was particularly tight-lipped about the plans, asking only that she dress warmly. Their destination turned out to be a small, private boat docked at a quiet marina. The vessel was elegantly appointed but not ostentatious, with twinkling lights strung along its railings. "You're full of surprises," Olivia said as he helped her aboard. "Is that a good thing?" Alexander asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice that she found endearing from a man who exuded confidence in every other aspect of his life. "A very good thing," she assured him, squeezing his hand. Dinner was served on the deck by a discreet staff who disappeared below once the meal was underway, leaving them alone beneath a sky full of stars as the boat drifted gently on the calm water. "This is magical," Olivia said, gazing up at the night sky. "How did you know I've always wanted to go stargazing away from the city lights?" Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, a moment of hesitation perhaps. "You mentioned once that you grew up in a small town where the stars were visible at night. I thought you might miss that." Had she told him that? Olivia couldn't recall specifically mentioning it, but she must have. It was the kind of detail one might share without thinking. "It's perfect," she said, letting go of the momentary confusion. "Thank you." After dinner, they stood at the railing, watching the city skyline shimmering in the distance. Alexander stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist to shield her from the cool breeze. The warmth of his body against hers felt right, as if they had stood this way 1,000 times before. "Olivia," he said, his voice close to her ear, "there's something I need to tell you." She turned in his arms to face him, her heart suddenly racing. Was this it? The moment when the fantasy would end? "What is it?" Alexander took a deep breath, his expression serious. "I haven't been entirely honest with you." Olivia's stomach dropped. Here it came. The wife. The girlfriend. The complicated situation he had neglected to mention until now. "I knew who you were from the moment I saw you that night in the rain." Of all the confessions she had braced herself for, this wasn't one of them. "What do you mean?" Alexander's hands moved to cup her face gently. "We've met before, Olivia. Many years ago." Confusion clouded her mind. "I don't understand. I would have remembered meeting you. It was a long time ago," he said softly. "We were different people then." And suddenly, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place, a memory surfaced from the recesses of Olivia's mind. A high school library. A shy, bookish girl with glasses. A tall, serious boy with intense eyes who sat at her table day after day, discussing books and dreams and the future. "Alex?" she whispered, using the shortened name she had known him by then. Alexander Reed was, "You are Alex from Westview High?" He nodded, a smile spreading across his face at her recognition. "I wondered when you would remember." Olivia's mind reeled with the revelation. Alex, the quiet, intense boy who had been her closest friend during that brief year before her mother had moved them again. Alex, who had shared her love of books and never made her feel strange for preferring libraries to parties. Alex, who had been the first boy to make her heart race, though she had never dared tell him. "But you're so different," she said, struggling to reconcile the boy she remembered with the powerful man before her. "In some ways," he conceded, "time changes us all. But in the ways that matter, I'm still the same person who used to argue with you about whether Dickens was overrated." A laugh bubbled up from Olivia's chest, part disbelief, part joy. "You were wrong about that, by the way. Dickens is a master." "Still stubborn, I see," Alex said, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "That hasn't changed." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, the initial shock giving way to confusion. "That first night, or at the gala, or during our first date?" Alexander's expression turned serious again. I wanted you to get to know me as I am now, not as the boy you once knew. And honestly, I wasn't sure if you remembered me at all. We were only friends for that 1 year, and you never answered my letters after you moved away. Letters? Letters? Olivia frowned. I never received any letters. It was Alexander's turn to look confused. I wrote to you every week for months. You never responded, so I thought you wanted to leave that part of your life behind. Olivia shook her head, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. My mother. She must have intercepted them. She never approved of our friendship. She thought you were distracting me from my studies. And yet here you are, still studying, Alexander said with a wry smile. Here we are, Olivia echoed, still trying to process the revelation. All these years later. Alexander's hands slid from her face to her shoulders, gentle but firm. When I saw you that night, standing in the rain at that bus stop, I thought I was hallucinating. The universe doesn't usually offer second chances so blatantly. You recognized me immediately. Olivia asked, remembering how bedraggled and exhausted she must have looked that night. Immediately, he confirmed. You could be 90 years old, and I'd still know those eyes, anywhere. The simple declaration made her heart clench. But why didn't you just tell me who you were? You were vulnerable, exhausted, possibly in shock, Alexander explained. It didn't seem like the right time for dramatic revelations, and then, after you were safe, I don't know, it seemed like fate had given us a clean slate, a chance to know each other as we are now, not as we remember. Being. Con. Olivia considered this, turning over his words in her mind. There was logic to it, even a certain romance in the idea of rediscovering each other, yet a small part of her felt deceived, kept in the dark while he had all the pieces of the puzzle. Are you angry? Alexander asked, watching her face closely. No, she said after a moment, finding it to be true. Not angry, just processing. It's a lot to take in. I understand, he said, starting to step back to give her space. Olivia caught his hands, keeping him close. I remember now how I felt back then. You were my first real friend in that school. The only person who saw beyond the quiet girl with her nose, always in a book. Alexander's expression softened. You were the only person who saw me as just Alex, not as the weird loner with the controlling father and the trust fund. We were quite a pair, Olivia said with a small laugh. We still could be, Alexander said quietly, his fingers interlacing with hers. If you want. The hope in his voice, so at odds with his usual confidence, tugged at something deep within her. This was Alex. Her, Alex. The boy who had once made her heart flutter when he smiled at her across a library table. The boy who had grown into a man who still made her heart race with a single look. I think I'd like that, she said softly. Relief and joy washed over his features. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, Alexander lowered his head until his lips were a breath away from hers. When she didn't move, he closed the final distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. But when Olivia's arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer, it deepened into something more powerful, years of unspoken feelings flowing between them like an electric current. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander pressed his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since we were 17, he confessed. Why didn't you? Olivia asked, her hands still linked behind his neck. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid you didn't feel the same, that I'd ruin the one good friendship I had. And now, she whispered. Now, I'm only afraid of losing you again, he said, his voice husky with emotion. Of waiting another 15 years to find you. You won't lose me, Olivia promised, the words coming easily despite her usual caution. I'm right here. They stayed on the boat until dawn crept over the horizon, talking about the years they had missed in each other's lives, filling in the blanks. Alexander spoke of building his company from the ground up, of the ruthless business world that had nearly broken him more than once. Olivia shared her struggles with law school, her dreams of making a difference, the loneliness she had never quite been able to shake. By the time the boat docked and Alexander drove her home, both were exhausted but exhilarated, as if a burden neither had fully acknowledged had been lifted from their shoulders. "May I see you tomorrow?" Alexander asked, as they stood outside her apartment door, reluctant to part even after the long night. Olivia smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." He kissed her once more, softly, a promise rather than a goodbye, before reluctantly heading back to the elevator. Inside her apartment, Olivia leaned against the closed door, her fingers touching her lips, marveling at the strange turns life could take. From a missed bus stop to rediscovering her first love, now a man who could have any woman in the city but somehow still wanted the shy girl who preferred books to parties. For the first time in a long time, the future seemed full of possibilities rather than obstacles. Over the next few months, Olivia and Alexander's relationship deepened and solidified. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, seeing each other whenever their busy schedules allowed. Alexander respected her independence, never pressuring her to change her life to accommodate his wealth or status. Instead, he found ways to support her goals, sometimes as simple as bringing dinner to her apartment on nights when she needed to study, or as significant as connecting her with legal mentors who could guide her career. Gradually, Olivia began to share their relationship with others. Marissa was predictably shocked and then thrilled by the revelation, though she couldn't quite understand why Olivia had kept it secret for so long. "I'm dating the Alexander Reed, and you think I'd keep that quiet?" she had exclaimed when Olivia finally confessed. "I'd have it printed on business cards." The public aspects of dating someone as high-profile as Alexander took more adjustment. The first time they were photographed together at a charity event, Olivia's phone had exploded with messages from old acquaintances and even distant relatives who had recognized her in the society pages. Overnight, her social media following had quadrupled, with strangers suddenly interested in the mysterious woman who had captured the elusive tech billionaire's heart. Alexander had been apologetic but unsurprised. "This is the part of my life I hate the most," he admitted. "The constant scrutiny, the speculation. If it becomes too much—" "It won't," Olivia had assured him, though privately, she found the attention disconcerting. She had always been the person in the background, the observer rather than the observed. But for Alexander, she was willing to step into the spotlight occasionally. 6 months into their relationship, Alexander invited Olivia to move into his penthouse apartment, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a breathtaking view of the city. The offer had come with assurances that she could maintain her own apartment as long as she wanted, that there was no pressure to take this step if she wasn't ready. Olivia had considered the proposal carefully. She valued her independence, the small sanctuary she had created for herself. But she also recognized that she was spending most nights at Alexander's place anyway, that waking up beside him had become the best part of her day. "Yes," she had said finally, "but I keep my apartment until the lease is up. Just in case." "Just in case what?" Alexander had asked, a flicker of hurt crossing his features. "Just in case you get tired of finding my law books all over your beautiful furniture," Olivia had replied lightly, easing the moment with humor. The transition had been smoother than Olivia expected. Alexander's home was spacious enough that she could carve out her own study area, and his housekeeper seemed delighted to have someone else to fuss over. More importantly, they settled into domestic life with surprising ease, finding comfort in shared routines and quiet evenings. But as their relationship solidified, new challenges emerged. Alexander's business often required him to travel, sometimes for weeks at a time. Olivia's finals and internship applications consumed more and more of her attention. They navigated these separations as best they could, with daily video calls and text messages, but the demands of their respective worlds sometimes created distance. It was during one of Alexander's business trips to Tokyo that Olivia received the news that would test their relationship in an unexpected way. She had just returned from her internship at a public defender's office when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Chen?" a crisp voice inquired when she answered. "This is Margaret Willis, from Blackwell Hayes Law Firm. I'm calling regarding your application for our summer associate position." Olivia's heart raced. Blackwell Hayes was one of the most prestigious public interest law firms in the country, known for taking on high-profile civil rights cases and advocating for vulnerable populations. She had applied for their summer program almost as an afterthought, assuming her chances were negligible. "Yes, this is Olivia Chen," she confirmed, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm pleased to inform you that we would like to offer you the position," Ms. Willis continued. "Your application was quite impressive, particularly your essay on access to justice for immigrant communities." Olivia gripped the phone tighter, barely able to believe what she was hearing. "Thank you. I'm honored. There's one aspect of the position I should mention," Ms. Willis added. "The internship is based at our San Francisco office. We would need you to relocate for the 3-month period, starting next month. All housing and relocation expenses would be covered, of course." San Francisco, 3,000 miles away from Alexander. For 3 months. I'll need some time to consider," Olivia said, her initial elation now tinged with conflict. "When would you need my decision?" "By the end of next week," Ms. Willis replied. "I understand it's a significant commitment, especially with the relocation aspect. Please take the time you need to consider, but do let us know by Friday." After hanging up, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed she now shared with Alexander, emotions warring within her. This opportunity was exactly what she had been working toward, a chance to gain experience with the kind of legal work she was passionate about. It could open doors that might otherwise remain closed to someone without connections or an elite law school pedigree. But 3 months away from Alexander, just as their life together was taking shape, the timing couldn't be worse. She considered calling him immediately, but decided against it. With the time difference, it would be the middle of the night in Tokyo. Besides, this was a conversation they should have face to face. Alexander returned 2 days later, exhausted from his trip, but delighted to be home. He swept Olivia into his arms as soon as he walked through the door, kissing her as if they had been separated for years rather than weeks. "I missed you," he murmured against her hair, his arms still wrapped tightly around her. "I missed you too," Olivia replied, breathing in his familiar scent. "How was Tokyo?" "Productive," he said, releasing her reluctantly. "The partnership is moving forward, which means I shouldn't have to travel there again for at least 6 months." The mention of time and distance provided the opening Olivia needed. "Speaking of travel, there's something I need to talk to you about." Alexander's expression turned serious as he caught the note in her voice. "That sounds ominous. What is it?" They moved to the living room, settling on the sofa that overlooked the city skyline. As the sun set outside the wall of windows, Olivia explained about the offer from Blackwell Hayes, her excitement about the opportunity, and the requirement to relocate temporarily. Alexander listened without interrupting, his face impossible to read. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the darkening sky outside. "You have to take it," he said finally, turning to face her. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity you've been working toward. It would be a mistake to pass it up." His immediate support should have been reassuring, but something in his tone gave Olivia pause. "But it means 3 months apart, just when we started building a life together." 3 months isn't forever," Alexander said, reaching for her hand. "We can make it work. Weekend visits, video calls. It's not ideal, but your career matters too." "Are you sure?" Olivia pressed, studying his face. "Because if you asked me to stay, I would. We could look for something similar here." Alexander's expression softened. "That's exactly why I'd never ask you to stay. Your dreams matter, Olivia. They were part of who you were when I fell in love with you, both times." The casual declaration of love the first time. Either of them had said the words momentarily distracted Olivia from the matter at hand. "You love me?" A smile curved Alexander's lips. "Of course I love you. I thought that was obvious." "You never said it," Olivia pointed out, her heart racing. "I'm saying it now," Alexander replied, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you, Olivia Chen. I have since we were teenagers, in one way or another. And because I love you, I want you to take this opportunity. We'll figure out the rest." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as the dual revelations his love and his selfless support washed over her. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both new and familiar on her tongue. "And I'll miss you terribly." "We'll visit," Alexander promised, brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I can work from anywhere occasionally, and 3 months will pass before you know it." With his blessing, Olivia accepted the position at Blackwell Hayes. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation, arranging for a leave of absence from Morgan Stanley, packing essentials for her temporary move, and spending as much time with Alexander as possible before their Aldi. Separation. The night before her departure, they lay awake in bed, talking softly in the darkness about everything and nothing. Alexander held her close, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare skin, as if memorizing the feel of her. "I have something for you," he said eventually, reaching for the nightstand drawer. "A going-away present of sorts." He pressed a small velvet box into her hand. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant in the shape of a star, small diamonds catching the dim light from the window. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, touching the pendant gently. "To remind you of our night on the boat," Alexander explained, taking the necklace and fastening it around her neck. "When we found each other again," Olivia turned in his arms, kissing him deeply, "as if I could forget." They made love slowly that night, with a tenderness that spoke of all the words they couldn't say, the fear of separation mingling with the certainty of their connection. Later, as Alexander slept beside her, Olivia watched the rise and fall of his chest, committing to memory the peaceful expression on his face, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the strength in his hands even at rest. 3 months, she told herself. Just 3 months, and then they would be together again, their lives once more intertwined. It wasn't so long, in the grand scheme of things. She couldn't have known then how those 3 months would test them both, how distance would reveal truths they had been too close to see. San Francisco welcomed Olivia with its characteristic fog and charm. The apartment provided by Blackwell Hayes was small but stylish, located in a vibrant neighborhood with easy access to their downtown office. Her work at the firm was everything she had hoped for: challenging, meaningful, and surrounded by passionate attorneys who shared her commitment to social justice. The first month passed quickly, her days filled with research, client interviews, and courthouse visits. Alexander called every evening, eager to hear about her experiences, always supportive and interested. On weekends, they spent hours on video calls, talking as if they were still in the same room. In the second month, small fissures began to appear. Alexander's company launched a new product, consuming more of his time and attention. Olivia's caseload increased as she proved her capabilities to the senior attorneys. Their calls grew shorter, sometimes missed altogether due to conflicting schedules and time zone differences. When Alexander finally managed to visit for a weekend in the middle of the second month, there was an awkwardness between them that neither had anticipated. Their rhythms had changed, their daily lives now shaped around different priorities and people. "It feels strange, having you here but feeling like we're still somehow apart," Olivia admitted as they walked along the waterfront on his last evening. Alexander squeezed her hand, his expression troubled. "I know. I didn't expect it to be this hard. Is it just the distance?" Olivia asked, voicing the fear that had been growing within her. "Or is it something else?" Alexander stopped walking, turning to face her. "What do you mean?" Olivia struggled to find the right words. "Sometimes I wonder if we rushed into this. If finding each other again made us skip steps we shouldn't have." Pain flashed across Alexander's features. "Do you regret moving in with me?" "No," Olivia said quickly. "That's not what I meant. I wonder if we know each other as well as we think we do. The Alex I knew as a teenager and the Alexander you are now, there's a lot of life in between that we didn't share." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the bay, where the setting sun cast golden light across the water. "You're right," he said finally. "There's a lot we don't know about each other's pasts. But does that change how we feel in the present?" "I don't know," Olivia admitted. "That's what scares me." Alexander turned back to her, his eyes searching hers. "What are you afraid of, really? That you'll discover something about me you can't accept? Or that I'll discover something about you?" The question hit closer to home than Olivia wanted to admit. There were parts of her life she hadn't shared with Alexander, choices she had made during those years of struggle that she wasn't proud of. Would he look at her differently if he knew? Both, I suppose, she said softly. Alexander took her hands in his grip warm and steady. Then let's stop hiding. Ask me anything, Olivia. Anything you want to know about the years between then and now, and I'll do the same. And so, on their last night together before he returned to the city, they sat in her small apartment and peeled back the layers they had kept hidden. Alexander spoke of his father's cruelty, the manipulation and emotional abuse that had driven him to build his company as both a shield and a form of rebellion. He confessed to relationships that had failed because he kept people at a distance, afraid to show vulnerability after years of having it weaponized against him. Olivia, in turn, told him about the year she had dropped out of college, overwhelmed by debt and her mother's illness. How she had worked 3 jobs and still nearly lost their home. How she had briefly dated a professor when she returned to school, a relationship that had ended badly and almost derailed her academic career. She spoke of the loneliness that had been her constant companion, the way she had built walls around herself for protection. They talked until dawn, their honesty sometimes painful, but ultimately healing. When Alexander left the next morning, the awkwardness had been replaced by a deeper understanding, a foundation stronger than the one they had been building on before. This isn't goodbye, he promised, as they stood at the security checkpoint at the airport. It's just an intermission. Olivia smiled through her tears, holding tight to his hands. I'll be home before you know it. The final month of her internship passed in a blur of casework and preparation for her return. Alexander called more regularly again, their conversations now imbued with a new depth and honesty. They spoke of the future, her final year of law school, his plans to expand the company's charitable foundation, the possibility of a longer trip together once she was back. When her last day at Blackwell Hayes arrived, Olivia was surprised by the bittersweet feeling that accompanied her goodbyes to the attorneys and staff who had become friends over the summer. They had offered her a permanent position upon graduation, a dream opportunity that would require another move to San Francisco. Think about it, the managing partner had urged. We'd be lucky to have you, and San Francisco is a wonderful city to build a life in. Olivia had promised to consider it, though her heart was already pulling her back to Alexander, to the life they had begun to create together. The flight home felt both endless and too short, giving her time to reflect on how much had changed in 3 months. She had grown more confident in her legal abilities, more certain of her career path. But she had also learned that love required work, that even the strongest connections needed tending. When she stepped into the arrivals hall, her eyes immediately found Alexander among the waiting crowd. He stood slightly apart from the others, tall and striking in a simple white shirt and dark jeans, his eyes scanning the passengers until they landed on her. The smile that broke across his face sent warmth flowing through her veins. In 3 long strides, he reached her, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that spoke of all the longing they had endured. "Welcome home," he whispered against her hair, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm home," she agreed, knowing she meant more than just the city, more than just his apartment. Home was wherever they were together. That night, as they lay tangled in their bed, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, Alexander propped himself up on one elbow, gazing down at her with an expression that made her heart race. "I have a question," he said, his voice serious despite the smile playing at his lips. "Another confession?" Olivia teased, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "No, a proposition," Alexander replied, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "What would you say if I suggested we take a trip? A long one, maybe a month or 2. Olivia raised her eyebrows in surprise. "A month? What about your company? What about my classes?" "My executive team can handle things for a while," Alexander said. "And you could take a semester off, or arrange for remote studies. You've been working nonstop for years, Olivia. Don't you think we deserve some time just for us?" The idea was tempting, escaping the pressures of work and study, exploring the world with the man she loved. But it also triggered the cautious part of her nature, the part that had kept her focused on her goals despite all obstacles. "Where would we go?" she asked, allowing herself to consider the possibility. Alexander's eyes lit up at her not quite refusal. Anywhere you want. Europe, Asia, South America, or all of them. No schedules, no deadlines, just us, discovering the world together. It sounds wonderful, Olivia admitted, but also terrifying. I've never just stopped, taken time without a clear purpose. Maybe that's exactly why you should, Alexander suggested gently. Life isn't just about achieving goals, Olivia. It's about experiencing joy along the way. She thought about the years she had spent with her head down, pushing forward toward a future that always seemed just out of reach. The sacrifices she had made, the experiences she had postponed, the simple pleasures she had denied herself in service of her ambitions. When would we leave? She asked, a smile slowly spreading across her face. Alexander grinned, recognizing her capitulation. As soon as you're ready. A week, a month. Whenever your affairs are in order. You're serious about this, Olivia realized, studying his eager expression. Completely, he confirmed. Life is unpredictable, Olivia. These past 3 months showed me that. We should take our happiness where we can find it, while we can. Olivia pulled him down for a kiss, her heart full of a joy she had rarely allowed herself to feel. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, let's do it. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Olivia arranged for a leave of absence from her program, promising to return for her final semester. Alexander delegated responsibilities to his executive team, setting up systems to keep him informed of critical developments while they traveled. They decided to start in Japan, a nod to their brief separation when Alexander had been in Tokyo. From there, they would travel through Southeast Asia, then to Europe, following their whims rather than any rigid itinerary. The night before their departure, as Olivia packed her carefully curated wardrobe for the trip, Alexander appeared in the doorway of their bedroom with a small wrapped box in his hands. Another going-away gift? She asked, smiling as she recognized the familiar jewelry box shape. Not quite, Alexander said, his voice unusually nervous. This is more of a coming-together gift. Something in his tone made Olivia's hands still on the clothes she was folding. She turned to face him fully, her heart beginning to race as she saw the gravity in his expression. Olivia, he began, then seemed to lose his words. Taking a deep breath, he continued, These past months, being apart and then coming back together, have shown me something I already knew, but was perhaps too afraid to fully acknowledge. He moved closer, the small box trembling slightly in his hands. I can't imagine my life without you in it, not for 3 months, not for 3 days, not for a single moment if I can help it. Olivia's breath caught as understanding dawned. This wasn't just a gift, this was the moment that would change everything, again. Alexander sank to one knee beside their bed, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, its center stone surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. Olivia Chen, he said, his voice steady now, filled with certainty. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that second chances can be even better than first ones? Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes as she looked down at the man who had found her twice, who had been patient with her fears and supportive of her dreams. The boy who had shared her love of books had become the man who wanted to share her life. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, of course, yes. Alexander's face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, the fit perfect, as if it had been made specifically for her hand. He rose and swept her into his arms, spinning her around the room as they both laughed and cried simultaneously. I love you, he said, setting her down gently but keeping her close. I love your determination and your kindness and your brilliant mind. I love how you see the world and how you make me want to be better. I love you too, Olivia replied, her voice thick with emotion. I love your strength and your gentleness and the way you never stopped believing in me, even when I stopped believing in myself. They held each other in the glow of their shared future, the weight of the ring on Olivia's finger, a tangible reminder that their second chance had become something even more precious than their first. Their engagement trip through Asia and Europe was a revelation in ways neither had anticipated. Away from the pressures of work and study, they discovered new depths to their relationship. They argued about directions in Tokyo, laughed until their sides hurt at a cooking class in Thailand, and found quiet moments of connection in the ancient temples of Cambodia. In Paris, they spent an entire day at the Louvre, Alexander indulging Olivia's love of art, while she patiently listened to his theories about the intersection of technology and creativity. In Rome, they got lost in the winding streets and discovered a small trattoria where the owner, upon learning of their engagement, insisted on preparing a special meal and toasting their love with his finest wine. Each new place brought new facets of their personalities to light. Olivia discovered that Alexander was an unexpectedly good dancer, while he learned that she had a hidden talent for languages, picking up basic phrases in each country they visited with remarkable speed. But perhaps most importantly, they learned to be present with each other, to exist in moments without the constant pressure of future goals or past regrets. For the first time in her adult life, Olivia allowed herself to simply be happy, to enjoy the luxury of time and love without guilt or anxiety about what came next. 2 months into their journey, as they sat on a terrace in Santorini, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Alexander brought up the subject they had been avoiding. "We should probably start thinking about going home," he said, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "As much as I'd love to stay in this bubble forever." Olivia nodded, though part of her wanted to protest. "I know. I need to finish my degree, and you have a company to run." "About that," Alexander said, his tone becoming more serious, "there's something I've been thinking about, a proposition of sorts." Olivia turned to face him, curious about the note of excitement in his voice despite the gravity of his expression. "What if you didn't have to choose between finishing your degree and starting your career?" he asked. "What if there was a way to do both, in a setting that aligned with your values?" "I'm not sure I follow," Olivia said, though her heart was beginning to race with anticipation. Alexander shifted to face her fully, his eyes bright with an idea that had clearly been developing for some time. "Reed Innovations has been exploring ways to expand our social impact beyond traditional philanthropy. What if we established a legal aid division, focused on technology-related civil rights issues? Digital privacy, algorithmic bias, access to technology for underserved communities." End quote. Olivia's eyes widened as she began to understand what he was suggesting. "You're talking about creating an entire legal department." "I'm talking about creating your legal department," Alexander said, his voice warm with certainty. "You could finish your degree while building the program from the ground up, design it according to your vision, hire the team you want to work with, take on the cases that matter to you." The scope of what he was offering took Olivia's breath away. It was more than a job, more than a career opportunity. It was a chance to shape the future of technology law, to ensure that the digital revolution served justice rather than undermining it. "Alexander," she said slowly, "this would be a massive undertaking. The investment alone is worth it," he finished firmly. "Not just financially, though I believe it will be profitable in the long run, but because it's the right thing to do, and because you're the right person to do it." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes as the magnitude of his faith in her washed over her. "You really believe I could do this?" "I believe you could do anything you set your mind to," Alexander replied, cupping her face gently. "But more than that, I believe this is what you're meant to do. It combines your legal expertise with your passion for justice, and it addresses some of the most pressing issues of our time." As they talked late into the night, planning and dreaming, Olivia felt a familiar excitement building within her. This wasn't just a career opportunity. It was a calling, a chance to make the kind of difference she had always hoped to make, but on a scale she had never imagined possible. "There's one condition," she said, as dawn began to lighten the sky above the Aegean Sea. Alexander raised an eyebrow, curious. "If I'm going to run a legal department, I need to be qualified to practice law first. I still need to finish my degree and pass the bar exam." "Of course," Alexander agreed immediately. "We'll make sure your schedule allows for that, and we'll bring in experienced attorneys to mentor you and help build the foundation while you're completing your studies." Olivia smiled, feeling the pieces of her future clicking into place with a satisfaction she had never experienced before. Then yes. Let's change the world. One case at a time. They returned to New York energized and focused, their time away having given them clarity about what they wanted their shared future to look like. While Alexander worked with his team to establish the legal framework for the new division, Olivia threw herself into her final semester of law school with renewed purpose. The announcement of Reed Innovations' new Civil Rights and Technology Legal Division made headlines in both the business and legal worlds. The company's commitment to investing $50 million over 5 years in digital rights advocacy was unprecedented, and Olivia found herself thrust into the spotlight as the division's future director. The attention was overwhelming at first, but with Alexander's support and media training, she learned to articulate her vision with confidence. She spoke about the need for legal frameworks that protected individuals in an increasingly digital world, about the responsibility of technology companies to consider the social impact of their innovations. Technology should empower people, not exploit them, she said in an interview with a legal journal. Our goal is to ensure that as our digital capabilities expand, our commitment to justice and equality expands with them. The months leading up to her bar exam were intense, but Olivia had never felt more motivated. She was studying not just for a test, but for the opportunity to lead a movement that could reshape how technology and law intersected. When she received the news that she had passed the bar exam, Alexander was waiting outside the testing center with a bouquet of her favorite flowers and a smile that could have powered the entire city. "Congratulations, Counselor Chen," he said, sweeping her into his arms. "I can't believe it's real," Olivia said, still in shock. "I'm actually a lawyer." "You've been a lawyer in every way that matters for years," Alexander replied. "Now you just have the paper to prove it." That evening, they celebrated with dinner at Bella Not, the same restaurant where they had shared their first official date. As they sat in the same booth where they had rediscovered each other, Olivia marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. "Any regrets?" Alexander asked, as if reading her thoughts. Olivia considered the question seriously. A year ago, she had been a struggling paralegal with dreams that seemed impossibly distant. Now, she was engaged to a man she loved deeply, about to launch a career that combined her passions with her skills, with resources she had never imagined having access to. "None," she said finally, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Not a single one." Alexander smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "Not even about that wrong bus stop?" Olivia laughed, remembering that rainy night that had changed everything. "Especially not about that. If I hadn't gotten lost, we might never have found each other again." "I would have found you eventually," Alexander said with quiet certainty. "I've been looking for you in every room I've entered since I was 17 years old." 6 months later, Olivia stood in the mirror of a bridal suite, adjusting the simple but elegant wedding dress she had chosen. The ceremony would be small, just family and close friends, held in the garden of Alexander's family estate outside the city. Marissa, her maid of honor, bustled around her, making final adjustments to her hair and makeup, chattering nervously about the timeline and the weather forecast. "You look absolutely radiant," she said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "I still can't believe my shy little library mouse is marrying a billionaire. I'm still the same person." Olivia protested, though she had to admit that the confident woman in the mirror bore little resemblance to the frightened girl who had collapsed on that street corner not so long ago. "Same person, bigger dreams," Marissa corrected with a grin. "And speaking of dreams, I heard the legal division hired 3 more attorneys this week." Olivia nodded, her excitement about the work tempering even her wedding day nerves. "We're taking on our first major case next month. A class action suit against a social media company for algorithmic discrimination. Save the world later," Marissa said firmly. "Today is about marrying the love of your life." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Olivia's mother entered, elegant in a blue dress that brought out her eyes. The years had been kind to her, and her face was soft with emotion as she took in her daughter's appearance. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Your father would be so proud." Olivia's throat tightened with emotion. Her father had passed away during her 2nd year of law school, and his absence was the only shadow on an otherwise perfect day. "I wish he could be here," she said softly. He is here, her mother replied, touching the small locket Olivia wore, which contained his photograph. He's in every choice you've made, every dream you've pursued. He raised a daughter who changes the world just by being in it. Before Olivia could respond, another knock came at the door. Alexander's best man, his business partner David, peered in. Sorry to interrupt, but the groom is getting antsy. Are we ready? Olivia took a deep breath, her hand unconsciously going to the star pendant she still wore, now joined by the engagement ring that caught the light with every movement. I'm ready, she said, and meant it. The garden was transformed with white flowers and soft lighting, intimate but magical. As Olivia walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, her eyes found Alexander immediately. He stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but it was his expression that took her breath away, a mixture of love, pride, and wonder that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. When she reached the altar and took his hands, the officiant began the ceremony, but Olivia barely heard the words. All her attention was focused on Alexander's face, on the promises they were making to each other, on the future they were building together. The couple has written their own vows, the officiant announced, and Alexander stepped forward first. Olivia, he began, his voice strong and clear. 15 years ago, you were the first person to see me for who I really was, not who I was supposed to be. Today, you're still that person, the one who looks past the surface, to the heart of things. You've made me braver, kinder, more hopeful. You've shown me that love isn't just about finding someone who completes you, but about becoming someone worthy of being loved in return. End quote. He paused, his voice growing softer. I promise to support your dreams, even when they take you far from me. I promise to challenge you when you need it and comfort you when you don't. I promise to love you not just for who you are today, but for who you're still becoming. And I promise that no matter how far we travel or how much we change, I will always find my way back to you. End quote. Olivia's eyes were swimming with tears as she spoke her own vows, her voice steady despite her emotion. Alexander, you found me when I was lost, both literally and figuratively. You saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself, and you gave me the courage to reach for dreams I thought were impossible. You've taught me that love isn't just about being rescued, but about rescuing each other, every day, in small ways and large ones. She squeezed his hands, drawing strength from his steady presence. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word in business, in life, in all the adventures yet to come. I promise to see you, really see you, just as you've always seen me. I promise to love your ambitious heart and your gentle soul, your strength and your vulnerability. And I promise that no matter where life takes us, home will always be wherever we are together. When they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, their kiss was gentle but profound, a sealing of promises made and futures shared. As they walked back down the aisle together, Olivia caught sight of their reflection in the garden's pond. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from the ashes of missed connections. Wrong turns. The reception was a celebration of not just their marriage, but of the journey that had brought them to this moment. Alexander's business partners toasted their success, while Olivia's law school classmates celebrated her upcoming career. But the most touching moment came when Alexander's elderly housekeeper, who had known him since childhood, pulled Olivia aside. I've never seen him happy like this, she said, her eyes bright with tears. You've brought him home to himself. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Alexander and Olivia found themselves alone in the garden where they had just been married. The lights twinkled overhead like stars, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. No regrets? Alexander asked, echoing their conversation from months before. Olivia smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them here. The wrong bus stop, the missed letters, the years of separation, the fears and challenges they had overcome. Not a single one, she replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. Every wrong turn led us exactly where we needed to be. Alexander wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as they swayed to music only they could hear. Here's to second chances, he murmured against her hair. And third chances, and fourth chances, and however many it takes, Olivia added with a laugh. Because some love stories are worth getting right. Above them, the stars shone brightly, witness to a love that had survived time and distance, misunderstanding and separation, to become something stronger and more beautiful than either of them could have imagined alone. In the distance, the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars, full of other people's stories, other missed connections, and second chances. But for Alexander and Olivia, this was their moment, their story, their beginning. And as they danced in the garden where they had just promised to love each other forever, they knew that sometimes the best journeys are the ones that bring you back to where you started, but with new eyes and a fuller heart. The shy girl who had taken the wrong bus stop had found her way home at last, not to a place, but to a person who had been waiting for her all along. And the boy who had loved her from afar had finally learned that the best second chances are the ones you create for yourself, through courage, patience, and the unwavering belief that love, real love, is always worth the wait. Their story was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, cases to fight, dreams to chase, perhaps children to raise and grow old together. But they would face it all together, two people who had learned that sometimes getting lost is the only way to find what you're truly looking for. As the night sky embraced them and the future stretched out before them, full of infinite possibilities, Alexander and Olivia began the next chapter of their lives, hand in hand, heart to heart, ready for whatever does. Adventures awaited them. Because when you find your person, your true home, every day becomes a chance to write a new page in a love story that has no ending, only new beginnings.